what happens if Scotland goes independent and the country starts to fail?
OK, so related to what we were talking about, let's start with you, Ruth. What happens if Scotland goes independent and it starts to fail?
First of all, nobody in Scotland wants Scotland to fail, whether you're voting yes or no, and nobody would work towards that. Everyone would work towards making it, an absolute success, whichever way around it was. But I think the best way to look at what you've done in the past is when we've had tough times, whether that's post-war, when we were a poor country, we were recovering from the war, whether that's the crash we had of our banks in 2008. The thing that Scots have done very well is work together with people across the United Kingdom for a common cause and to share the risks and responsibilities. I live in Glasgow and my sister lives in Newcastle and my best mate since I was 7 years old lives in Liverpool. And I can't find three cities that are more alike than Glasgow, Newcastle and Liverpool, and the idea that you want to put a border up between them or that we want to walk away for everything that we've built together, I just find it an anathema to everything that we as Scots stand for. We believe in common cause, we believe in working together, we believe in making the best that we can and bringing as many people along with us as we can, and that's what I want to see in the future, and I want to see that no matter which way the country votes on September the 18th.
I think it's important to make the point that Ruth's party nearly destroyed Glasgow, Newcastle and Liverpool. Ruth's party dismantled the industry in those cities and led to very high levels of poverty. So I think she could have chosen better examples. Every year for the past 33 years,
Joe.
Every year for the past 33 years, Scotland has contributed more per head in tax than the rest of the UK. So we're pooling resources to send our money away. I'd rather see that money stay in Scotland to be invested in our young people, in our infrastructure and creating jobs here in Scotland.
And every year we receive more public spending to the tune of £1,200 per person.
It's nonsense for the Tory party to say this, because they're saying they're talking about borders and then at the same time they're offering an in-out referendum for us to leave the EU. You know, it's beyond nonsense. They're the biggest threat to us leaving the European Union, leaving the biggest union of markets in the world. They want us to leave that.
But we want it reformed, and we want the reform to reflect some of our needs.
If you don't get it your way, and the Tory party being wagged at the tail by Nigel Farage and UKIP because they're terrified of losing. So you could end up with this ridiculous ridiculous situation, the referendum next year, where Scotland votes to stay in the EU. If we vote no and we lose the thing, if we stay, we can vote to stay in the EU, and England votes to leave it, but Scotland are then forced to leave the EU as part of the UK. I mean, it's utter nonsense.
Yes, lady here.
Touch on something that's not been brought up at all, the issue of disability. If Scotland becomes independent, the SNP have pledged to raise the carers allowance to be in line with job seekers because it's currently lower than that. Can any of the Better Together parties offer any similar kind of, raising the carers allowance or anything to help disabled individuals? Because right now, Ruth's government the party that you support, your government has been just wrecking lives, and that's not good enough, and it doesn't seem like it's going to get any better if we stay in the union.
One of the things that we've said is that these are decisions, for example, things like attendance allowance should be devolved to Scotland, so that should be part of the new devolution package. We've been very specific about that. But I think one of the things that we've seen very clearly in the White Paper is that there are an awful lot of promises on spending. There's not very much in talking about revenue raising and where the money for that spending's come from. And as this debate has gone on in Scotland for the last 2.5 years, there's been promises, promises, promises on spending, on spending, on spending. But the idea that you cut corporation tax for big business and that there's no other money coming in from anywhere else. I mean, I don't understand how you cut tax for the rich, which is the only redistributive measure that's in the White Paper. You keep all of the political stuff that's here, but you still manage to spend more. Where is the money coming from? Where is the money coming from?
Lady here.
I can understand how a lot of the rhetoric coming from the Yes campaign is very emotive and so on, but I really don't get why people have their head in the sand about the pain that's ahead. I mean, just today we saw, or just yesterday we saw the value of companies.
What about the pain right now?
Scottish companies.
We're in £1.3 trillion of debt.
But you don't think we're going to have massive spending if we go independent?
Of course, but this is the point. I mean, we started this off talking about who would be responsible if things start to go wrong. We would be responsible. That's what this is all about. We will make mistakes. This isn't going to be easy, but it'll be our mistakes. It'll be about us, people in Scotland, taking control. I mean, this country is a mess at the minute. We've got £1.3 trillion of debt. We've got nuclear weapons on the Clyde, food banks, bedroom tax. It has to be better than this, and we can do better than this.
Hugo.
The sad truth is it doesn't have to be better than this. I mean, look, we started off talking about what happens if Scotland fails. It's important to understand what that means. To understand what that means if Scotland fails. You know, there's some that'll tell you, 10 years you're going to have sort of burning cars in the street and zombies walking around and a sort of, burnt out post-apocalyptic nation. That's obviously rubbish. But what you talk about practically is a Scotland that drifts further and further behind the rest of the UK in standards of living, in income, in spending and investment. And if you ask about what happens if that takes place, I believe it will take place. That's contentious, fine. But you talk about what happens if that takes place. And what happens if that takes place is bitterness. What happens if that takes place is a political culture in Scotland that will blame the rest of the UK for that, because it will be blamed on the upshot of the negotiations that followed from independence. That is what will happen. And part of the reason why I'm a unionist and I would vote no is simply because I don't want to see the United Kingdom in which I live torn apart and fighting in that way. I think that's a really frightening prospect.
Okay. Gentlemen here, very closely.
First of all, just to come back to what you said, the only people that talk about fighting, divisions, borders, is the no camp. Yeah. That's the only people I hear talking about it. But that's not even my point. That's not my point. We're having this debate because Britain has failed. That's why we're having a debate. Britain has failed. This is no good. We need better.
If you think any new Scottish government would not continue to blame many of its problems, and with good reason, very possibly, on Westminster, I think you're mistaking yourself.
Rick, there's some interesting comments coming in online. This from David. The reason the Yes Brigade have looked so good is that they stuck to their message, not complicating it with answering financial questions with real answers. They've stuck to the anti-Westminster and Tory rhetoric that they know stir emotions. Tribalism has always been a disaster for these isles. Nationalism will feed nationalism. Welcome to a third world economy, Scotland. Joan, hang on. People's views at home are equally valid. Does David have a point?
A couple of weeks ago, I spent a day helping distribute food parcels at a food bank in Dumfries. The people that I was distributing food parcels to were completely destitute because of sanctions imposed by Ruth's Tory colleagues in London. That is pain now. People are destitute now. We've seen a 400% rise in food banks in Scotland, and certain sections of society have been hit worse: single parents, disabled people. It's absolutely appalling, and this is what this referendum is about. This referendum is about making Scotland a more humane place by putting Scottish policies in and putting Scottish people in charge.
Okay. Gentleman here in the short sleeve shirt.
Hi, there was the reference there that Britain was broken. But if Britain is broken, then surely all of Britain is to blame and not just England.
Nobody's blaming this thing.
Okay, a lot of people saying you're not necessarily blaming England.
So in terms of all I've heard through both campaigns is always about currency and what's going to happen and what powers are going to be devolved. But what's going to happen in terms of representation, because that's all anybody really wants to know. Who's going to be represented? Women and other liberation campaigns are always underrepresented, and young people and old people. What's going to happen? We want representation.
Ruth?
Well, I mean, I don't know the political model that the SNP is projecting for an independent Scotland. What I think at the moment is that we do need more people to find their voice. And we don't just need people to find their voice in this country, we need to find their voice all over the world. And one of the things that I'm very proud on, and I would take issue with the man that said that Britain is broken, is that actually I think the UK does play its role in the world. You look around the world and we are the second biggest giver of aid anywhere. There are people alive in the world today because we shoulder a burden. Now, I'm not saying that an independent Scotland wouldn't do that.
Okay. We'll get on to that.
UK gave £15 million in a fortnight to Palestine because it was able to do that. Now, I look around the world and I look at the immunisation programmes that are run out of East Kilbride in Scotland, that are DFID programmes, that are keeping people alive in Africa. And that actually makes me proud to be British. Scottish, too. Well, so what was that about? What was Nestle?
The head CEO of Nestle himself said water was their basic human right.
No one here from Nestle to defend themselves, so we can't really talk about that. Gentleman with the beard at the back on the right.
I would like to raise an issue about financial. Alex Salmon keeps saying about the oil, but resources are eventually get used up. So that means the only conclusion I can come to is they have to raise taxes up.
Again, I hate on that because I think the thing is it's a salmon line, but we're the only country in the world who seems to see oil as a burden. You know, we're the only country I think that has got poorer since we've got oil. You know, it's going to be there for a long time. You know, I think we'd be more than successful without it, but having it there is a huge bonus, and we should not underestimate it.
It's important to understand the reality of the oil situation, because where oil comes in, people talk a lot. It's been mentioned a couple of times tonight. Scotland contributes more than it takes back, which is marginally true. That's true because of oil. And what that means is that's happening already because of oil. So what that means is an independent Scotland, oil is going to provide no more money. It's not like there's oil money that at the moment is taken away. There'll be no more money because of oil, because all that's being used, raising the money per head in Scotland to the level it's already at.
Can I put the oil in context, please? Is that all right, Rick?
Yes.
Just briefly. I mean, I think we should be aware. I'm not saying that oil is a burden. I'm just saying it's not the answer to everything, and it doesn't plug every financial gap. I mean, if you look at yesterday, more was wiped off Scottish companies in a single day than we raise in oil revenue in an entire year. More is spent on welfare just in Scotland every single year for the last 10 years than the entire tax take from the entire North Sea for the last 10 years. So let's put this in context. This isn't an unlimited fund, and that's what we're saying. It's about making sure that people understand exactly what the contribution of oil is. Yes, it is a good contribution to the economy, but it does not answer every single need that Scotland has.
Is that right, Jane?
Oil is the icing on the cake for Scotland. Standard & Poor's, the rating agency, said that even without North Sea oil, Scotland would qualify for its highest economic assessment if we were an independent country. We have many strengths. We have our £13 billion food and drink industry, we have tourism, we have the creative industries, our universities are amongst the best in the world. I have real faith in people of Scotland. We will succeed whether or not we have oil, but oil gives us a fantastic head start, and I would much rather see it in control of the people of Scotland than Ruth's colleagues down in London.
Okay.